Yeah, I think that we're going to see a transformation in both organizations, but also in this, the skills that people are looking for. And so I want to make a couple of points. The first one is that, one of the cool things about Canada is that 98% of businesses are small businesses.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
that means like 1 to 99 people. And so I think that we might see less of these larger corporate organizations and more of the smaller
Mhm.
businesses that are fit in that 1 to 99 category. Actually, I was working with a client, and we're into the labor market research part of her program, and I showed her the stats. I went right to Stats Canada and showed her the stats, and it was like 98% are in the small businesses. And she was
Interesting.
shocked. She
Yeah.
guessed that and I usually get my clients to guess. I'm like, well, guess how
Yeah.
many small businesses there are in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's also reflective of Ontario as well. It's like 98.3 versus 98, right? So,
Yeah.
we have a lot of small businesses. And so what's I think also interesting is we might see the rise of more small businesses in light of sort of these big shifts and fundamental shifts.
Yes.
But we're also going to see like a flattening of organizations. I think that and I'm just going to spend a little time sort of digging into this
Yeah.
because I think it has the most interesting applications. Is
Right.
that sort of that middle manager responsibilities
Mhm.
will be taken over by some of our AI. So, for example, things like scheduling, reporting, those types of things can be sort of done in an automated fashion,
Yes.
and that will then require a little bit more of skill shifts for people. I think it creates an opportunity for, as you said earlier, where this front end role doesn't have to be a junior role. It could also be a senior person
Yes.
and vice versa. It doesn't have to be a senior person. It could also
True.
be a junior person. So this hierarchy pieces, I think, are going to sort of this idea of hierarchy pieces are going to like become much more eliminated, and we'll see more of like the ability for people to work in cross-functional teams,
Mm.
right? And cross-functional teams and collaboration more so than just even with um with people that they work with of different cultures, but also of like different generations, right? You're going to see younger workers needing to collaborate much more with older workers who are sort of seen as these experts. And so by flattening these organizations out, I think AI is going to have a big shift on that as well. They're also suggesting that sort of the AI agents will take on more and more of those complex roles, but I think that there also is going to be need for maybe some quality assurance to make sure that the AIs are doing the right things. And I think we talked a little bit, maybe even offline a little bit about sort of the
Right.
source of truth document as
Yes.
sort of being like, this is the wisdom and the knowledge of our organization, and this is how we kind of compare things to make our decisions. So as frontline sort of, or as AI handles sort of those operational data heavy tasks, I think we're going to see more of that human skills around strategic oversight, emotional intelligence, and that will be required of the frontline sort of junior people. They'll be empowered to make some of those more of those faster human decisions. So I think humans are going to continue to do the work. It's just going to look a little differently. And, that's kind of the reason why I think your project or your product became really intriguing to me, right? In terms of what you have to offer. I was like, I think this
Right.
could be a solution to some of the pieces that we've been talking about, right? Is can we
Correct.
create tools to support people shift much more quickly to go through that?
Right.
So another interesting piece is there is that the productivity paradox is sort of what it's being
Mhm.
called, is that there is still kind of a slow to adopt overall, businesses are taking their time in
Yeah.
adopting the use of AI. And actually, that makes sense when you think about the fact that you've got a small business that is 1 to 99 people. they have an interest in doing these things, but they may not have the resources
Yes.
to invest in use of AI, but also in the training of AI, in training people to
100%.
use it and learning and the experimentation. Larger organizations have the luxury of being able to sort of play a little bit more, but if you've got a very small, lean, one person per business, or even a 5-person business, they might be like, yeah, you know what, I really like to do this, but how do I do this if I'm still needing to demand work to the customers, right? Like, yes, I might have this archaic, um sort of inventory control. Like, I'm thinking of a bakery, right? You've got 5 people in a bakery. They're excellent at producing beautiful baked goods, but they don't have, they're using sort of an older software. Maybe it's an Excel, who knows what it is, right? They'd like to use it, but they're so busy in the business, doing the business, that they can't sort of make those changes. So it's like thinking about that problem there, right? Is how can we help them be able to adopt some of these pieces so that they could be a little bit more effective and yeah. Yeah. Effective and efficient is what I was trying to see. So it's sort of like this productivity paradox, the training gap, the trust in the training gap. And then I can see this one, there's a hesitant to be managed by AI. I do know that if I was, working in an organization and I'm adopting it, I
Yeah.
might not be super comfortable by being managed by an AI tool, right? I'd like that to be sort of more of a human thing yet. So there's kind of an interesting piece there as well, right? That we can kind of look at. And so I think it gets quite interesting around some of these pieces. I think,
Yeah.
there is obviously a look to do some of that AI driven restructuring kind of
Mhm.
for their workplaces, that those, again, they're sort of shifting from these functional hierarchies to, which I really like, outcome oriented emerging operational models. So it's like,
Yeah.
what is the outcome you want to achieve, and how can you structure things to be able to meet that particular goal?
Yeah, Liz, on that,
And then, yeah,
sorry, I thought of adding something which
yeah,
is
yeah.
related to the SMB part you mentioned, which is
Mhm.
pretty interesting that 98% is large for that means they're contributing to the larger side of the Canadian economy.
Mm,
One or two of those aspects where you said like the reason why they are slow also makes sense. They are already operationally busy.
yep.
It's pretty difficult to pull some resource out, and then you need to train that person because
Mhm.
they are new to it. Probably the current resource system, like employees, would be not the ones who are the tech savvy most of the time. In instances, they could be like used to the current infrastructure, right? So this is like a new infrastructure to be plugged in. And like you
Right.
pointed out, the large organizations can just on a click, tell their CTO to get it done, their training manager to incorporate a training from Claude or something. So that's happening. I've been
Yeah.
hearing that enterprises are now ensuring that by default they need to be trained on Claude or something like Cowork and get
Hmm.
used to it and all that aspects of tokenization and things. But it's
Yep.
very difficult for the SMBs. And I kind of see there is a nice kind of it's like a jigsaw puzzle
Yep.
where on one side there's a situation where SMBs need these AI adoption to be done, and they need those, like you said, the outcome driven people to come on board. On other side, we have this resource of human capital who are probably in the different ranks of junior to mid to senior level roles, who are the doers,
Right.
who are the subject matter experts in their particular task.
Yeah, I think that there can be, I think this sort of segues nicely into sort of the next section that we want to talk about, which is the skills adoption
Yeah,
mindset, right? Is the shift from job and task to
yeah,
skill sets, right? And I think this is sort
yes,
of the great shift that is happening. And we're hearing it also from others, some obviously some really smart folks beyond my wisdom, have been sharing about that. And if you're interested in, um, you can reach out to me later. I'll share with you
sure.
one of my favorite podcasters, who talks a lot about this.
We could
I
even
think
share
that
that on our resource page, like just
yeah,
to
yeah.
add.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. So in that in that mindset adoption, one of the things I think is it's sort of creating a little bit of that push and pull too, is the shift towards agency, right? And so it was interesting actually when we had that conversation
Yeah.
yesterday about what does agency mean, right?
Yeah,
We
like
often
for
think of
me, like,
agency as like,
sorry, Lisa, I was like, I'm being in the marketing and sales side, right?
yeah,
The word agency just rings to me that it's like a company whom
yeah,
I'm outsourcing something related to marketing or something.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So,
Yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can think of like travel agent or marketing agency or those types of things. But this sort of this idea of agency really is around the individual having autonomy to make decisions, act independently, have self sense of control and the capacity to self-influence. And so, this is sort of a term that comes from psychology. This is something I heard a lot of when we were in my coaching
uh
certificate, and this is really just around the individual's ability. And I think that's also something that add on as a layer for AI, where people want to do things differently. They want to work differently. They want to learn differently. They want to play differently, right? They want to focus on different things. And I think really it is this big shift towards this bigger term called agency. Like I said, what kind of pulls from psychology or even social justice. And so that creates, a mentality shift, right? In terms of what is it that we're doing if we're flexing to the shifting workplaces where we see less of these large corporate organizations and more of these smaller companies, we're going to see some of those. So,
yeah, like, uh, the one of the recent stat I read is a stat as in a forecasted trend is you actually covered that part that there's going to be more of small organizations. There's potential of that because it's basically if there is someone who comes with a business idea or product, right, or or a service, their dependency on too much of manpower and capital kind of reduces. Let's say someone wants to start up like a firm which is like consulting firm
mhm,
for you know new restaurant startups, right? And they can spin off a landing page, they can
mhm,
run their social media on their own, they can do their own research, they can automate bits and pieces of the sales lead generation because it's a consulting firm, right?
right.
Maybe a one or two resource or a three resource thing, they can automate most of these aspects. That's even for consulting, and even for on the other side, like if you're looking at a software development or a product development side, your resource need has become shortened. An LLM with coding ability. I was reading some paper yesterday that if there are like three software engineers with coupled with the LLM or coding stack, that's equivalent to today 15 or 10 to 15 member team. So the amount of
Mhm,
output is multiplied. So there's going to be like you said, shift towards smaller teams, and that also paves way for entrepreneurial kind of a situation,
right,
right? I think that entrepreneurial mind shift is not just as people need to be on their own, but they might be plugged into businesses, or
right.
they are part of a business but they're acting independently because they have to take care of that particular role or the pieces of that role. So I do see that shift, the comfort shift of the corporate side, like having spent my initial years in the corporate side where you have this proper SOPs, you have the
Yeah.
hierarchy and reporting times, your stand-up meeting times, and your deadlines and your KPIs, which are set by the HR or the departmental head. Here, you are probably going into a period where this is going to transform into smaller micro organizations within organizations. And
Yeah.
at the same time, giving the ability for individuals to become entrepreneurs, not necessarily like they need to build up a product or something, but they can offer themselves as the product itself.
Right.
You can productize yourself.
Right.
Probably you're someone good in go to market strategy and planning like me, and I could just go and plug in the go to market automation for an enterprise. Someone like uh, an expert in career or coaching in
Mhm.
that space can plug that particular L&D learning and development side of the piece in in an automated way to a business, and I
Yeah.
think it's applicable for any role
Yep.
the way I'm seeing it. So yeah, like that's my view on how this shift is kind of happening, because most of those basic roles like research or writing, scheduling are going to be taken care by automation. So there's going to be more value for the human higher skills of decision making, judgment, and
Mhm.
reasoning ability.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We're going to be seeing a lot of these, a lot of shift in some of those skills. It's around those sort of those human centered skills, the critical thinking skills, that the creativity, even I think even some of the coaching and facilitation, some leadership, some judgment will
Yes.
be a big part of the skill sets that are needed. And people are going to have to practice being able to do that. I think this is, really the a big part of the shift. We've sort of talked a little bit about this as, skills based hiring, but I think it's more than that. I think it's a shift in in both skills, but also in about also autonomy. People wanting, like I said that before, that agency. People wanting to sort of craft their life and their
Yeah.
work in really different ways. And again, I think this is one of the reasons why when you came to me and said, "Look, I've got this idea. I've shifted this idea into this other resource." I'm like, "Okay, I think now this could be interesting because it solves that challenge there." So why don't we spend just a few minutes giving people a
Ah,
teaser about what that might look like, and then we can kind of wrap it up. So
yeah, Lisa,
yeah,
like, thank you for that segue to talk on. And, you know, I think, Lisa, first I need to thank you for kind of resonating with the idea when I came up to you, because it wasn't what is regularly out there, but we were
yeah,
just looking at what is the possible outcome in the future
right,
and how things would shift. For me, I'm putting myself in the shoes of professional, because I am, and I've been in that space. And when I started looking at how the transformation of AI adoption was happening in the over the last year or so, I could kind of sense there's going to be a situation where both sides of the coin, like one side we have the hiring managers and the other side we have the professionals, are kind of going through a very transformational period. Businesses, SMBs, or large enterprises are making some tough decisions, right? They have to probably let go of people, they may have to shift budgets, they may
right,
have to comprehend that, how AI is making a competitor business much more efficient, and they have to race up to it. There's a lot going on. The heads of hiring managers and business leaders at one side, and they need to adopt faster to AI. That's another big challenge, because
right,
if not, they will be left alone. Like, if all the other people are moving ahead with AI automation and, those aspects, then it'll become difficult for them to sustain as a business. And on the flip side, like professionals, where I am at, when I introspect on that aspect, we we are at a point where we need to see that there's a big transformation happening out there. The way
yes,
how work happens is changing, and there is shift in the hiring policies and strategies of organizations. So, what could be my ideal role as an employee a year back is probably not existent or might not be existent in the coming
right,
year. So that is where this all started out. When we spoke initially, Lisa, like the last year, we were speaking of bridging basically the, a communication or a channel between the right talent and the right
hmm,
organization. So
that's right,
that hasn't shifted. That has become the foundation of what we are kind of looking at today.
yeah,
But got added on top of it is the need for the future. What is needed for the future of work, where there's need for professionals to transform themselves and be ready for a world where a 9-hour job is going to be done in 3 to 4 hours,
right,
and the rest of the job is going to be done by AI. And there's probably a redundancy of that particular job title
yes,
which they were always aspiring for. So they
yeah,
may have to see how they can be prepared and fit in. So that's basically the underlying kind of thing. I think, Lisa,
yeah,
I would want you to hear from you as well. Like, how do you see it? This is my view of seeing it.
yeah.
So, but I would want to hear from you as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously I shared the same vision because I said, okay, let's do it and let's see what we can build together. I think what we'll do is we'll leave it there and we will let our, intrigue our listeners for the next episode where we talk a little bit more about exactly what exactly it is we're talking about.